Welcome. I'm Anne Marie Harnett, President of the Congregation of First Parish in Plymouth. Welcome to this historic service today. This has been over 2 years in the making, and even though the process is not actually complete yet, we wanted to gather together in community to celebrate how far we have come and to be here together in this beautiful historic building that we are in the process of passing the stewardship on to the General Society of Mayflower Descendants. So I welcome everybody here, members of the congregation, family, friends, guests, and particularly members of the General Society of Mayflower Descendants. Let us begin.
This is a season where so many different peoples and religious traditions have rituals around light to honor the season and to move us ritually from the darkness of winter to the light of a new time. So we are participating in those this year as we light the Advent wreath and then the menorah. We human beings, in spite of all that has happened to us and been done by us, remain faithful. Something new, something vital, something promising is always coming, and there is always an air of expectation around us. Thus, in Advent, we light candles around a wreath taken from the ancient pagan fire wheel to mark the time of preparation, and with each new light, our anticipation grows. And I invite you all to read the piece in the order of service as I light the first two candles of the Advent wreath. Let our second candle be the candle of faith, and let it stand for our faith in the goodness of humanity and our ability to build a better world. Let this candle represent our belief in the grace of all that is holy, the love of God poured out on us all. May this faith give us strength for the journey ahead and courage to face whatever it is that troubles our hearts. And today is also the last day of Hanukkah, so we will light all of the candles on the menorah. We begin with the candle, the center candle. The shamas is the candle from which all other candles are lit. And then we begin with the new day, which would be the candle on the left, and then we move from right to left, lighting the other candles. And Anne-Marie will lead all of you. If you could turn to, what is it? Number 630 in the gray hymnal. And read, we got parts in italics.
Kindle the taper like the steadfast star.
Ablaze on the evening's forehead toward the earth.
And add each night a luster till afar.
And a full splendor shine above thy heart.
Clash, Israel, the cymbals, touch the lyre.
Blow the brass trumpet and the rush on the horn.
Chant psalms of victory till the heart take fire.
The Maccabean spirit be reborn.
And please rise in body or in spirit and turn to number 225 in the gray hymnal to sing with us, O Come, Emmanuel. to come and light our chalice for us this morning. Please read with me the words in the order of service.
Love is the spirit of the church, and service is law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, to speak the truth in love, and to help one another.
And I'd like to invite Jill Pimentel to come and share with me Conversation for All Ages. We have just recently hired Jill as our Director of Spiritual Enrichment for Children.
This is new for me. As some of you know, we have a Wonder Box. My RE kids know all about this. Today's Wonder Box, something very small. So, Art, do you wanna explain while I open, or I can open up here? So I've wrapped it up in tissue paper, and it'll be very hard to see. But what I've got here is a small handful of seeds, and to me, seeds symbolize the start of something, the beginning. So much is held in a single seed. It's not just the seed, it's everything the seed could become. So today's lesson for the RE kids ties into our theme of hope and what that seed could mean.
And you as a congregation and you as a general society plant seeds today as well. Seeds of hope for what this building can become, seeds of hope for what the congregation can become as we celebrate this very momentous occasion of transferring ownership of this building to the General Society of Mayflower Descendants. And we are all seeds that are part of that springing to life of what is to become. Please join in singing the words in your order of service as we invite our children and Jill and any other RE staff to lead.
So those of you who are new, please feel free to send your children. We'll be making a small gift that we would like to share with you. So if you would like to send your children, please do.
And we will all be meeting the children later up in Brewster Chapel. Someone from the Unitarian Universalist Association. I don't see Willard here. We will continue on with the service, and when he arrives, we will give him a chance to bring greetings from our regional and national offices. And Jan, I'd like to introduce Jan Blanchard and the other folks who are part of the Friends of the First Parish Meetinghouse, who have been so involved over many years in raising money for the restoration of this building. No, you have to come up here.
There are a couple of people missing. Rick McDonald is not here, Julia Rose is not here, and Joyce Stewart is not here. But myself, Bonnie, Donna Petrangelo, and Jack Barbas will read the meeting houses of the First Parish in Plymouth. Until 1637, religious services were probably held in the Common House on Leiden Street, and occasionally in the fort on Burial Hill, built in 1622.
The first meeting house was built in 1637 on the north side of Town Square. Richard Church and John Thompson were the architects and builders. It had a bell, but its dimensions are unknown and no description is preserved.
The second meeting house was built on the site of the present stone building. The picture of this house, the dimensions of which were 45 by 40 feet, is taken from a drawing made by Samuel Davis.
The third meeting house was erected in 1744 on the site of the former and measured 71 feet 10 inches in front and 67 feet 8 inches deep. Its spire, 100 feet high, was surmounted by a copper weathercock.
The fourth meeting house was built in 1831 on the same site, measuring 61 by 70 feet. It was designed by George W. Brimmer of Boston and built by Richard Bond of the same city. It was destroyed by fire on November 22nd, 1892.
The fifth and present meeting house was erected on the same site. The cornerstone was laid June 29, 1896, and the building was dedicated on December 21, 1899. It was designed by Hartwell, Richardson, and Driver of Boston, and built by John Y. Mainland of Boston.
Good morning. My name is Jan Blanchard, and for the past 9 years, I have been chair of the Meeting House Restoration Committee and more recently of the Friends of First Parish Meetinghouse Incorporated. Art asked me to speak this morning and to address the history of the Restoration Committee's efforts. Needless to say, I'm finding it very difficult to put 9 years of weekly meetings into a short or relatively short presentation. I'll try. In May of 2009, I sent an email to the National Trust for Historic Preservation asking for information on how we could obtain funds to restore the meeting house. I received a long reply with lots of suggestions, which led me to make many more phone calls to various agencies and nonprofits. One thing I learned was how little I knew about restoring a building. A restoration committee was formed, which included Rick McDonald and Bonnie Dyer. I also remember involvement of Diane Zola, Marie Lunt, and others who helped out at various times were Rick Sanchez, who created our first website, Marion Galvin, Julia Thomas, Donna Petrangelo, a current member of the committee, Charles Tarbuck, Conley Pierce, and Del Hammond, Julia Rose. We submitted 2 applications to the National Trust and received funding for a structural survey, which was conducted in early 2010, as well as a grant for a consultant, Mary Kay Elliott, who helped us to create a development plan.
In addition, we received a $1,000 grant from Entergy to update and republish the Little Gray Book entitled A Brief History of First Parish. And in 2011, at Mary Kay's suggestion, we hired Darcy Lee as our fundraising consultant. A feasibility study was completed with over 30 interviews of church members and other individuals connected to historic preservation in Plymouth. During the summers, we conducted tours of the Meeting House 3 days per week as another way to raise funds. Darcy helped us write a grant application to the Community Preservation Committee, and in 2012, we were awarded $307,000 to cover the cost of the restoration of the stained glass windows. In 2012, we also mailed our first newsletter and obtained a grant from the Plymouth Cultural Council to help fund our 2013 free public lecture series. In 2013, Darcy left us and we hired a new consultant, Eileen Briggs. We started a Facebook page. Serpentino Glass of Needham was awarded the contract to restore the windows, and we submitted an application for listing on the National Historic Register. Another grant was received from the Plymouth Cultural Council for our 2014 lecture series. After 6 months, we parted with Eileen and determined that we were able to move on without a paid consultant. In 2014, Chronicle contacted us and filmed a segment on the restoration project in which I was interviewed. The window restoration was completed, and First Parish was named one of Massachusetts' most endangered historic resources by preservation. We met with Senator Vinnie DiMacedo and Representative Matt Miratari funding, but they were unable to help us. In 2014, First Parish was listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and a plaque was hung on the front of the Meeting House. Also in 2014, a contract was signed with Partners for Sacred Places for a feasibility study. Finally, at the suggestion of arts and crafts expert David Berman, the Restoration Committee, spearheaded by Rick McDonald and Donna Petrangelo, made plans to write an illustrated booklet on the Meeting House's history, architectural, and arts and crafts elements. In 2015, the Partners study was completed, concluding that the congregation was not ready for a major fundraising campaign, and recommending that we set up a nonprofit independent of the church to raise money for restoration. An $850 grant was received from the Cynthia Woods Mitchell Fund to publish the illustrated booklet. Contact was made with Spencer & Vogt Architects to discuss restoration of the east-facing facade, where major deterioration of the grout was causing interior damage to the building. We explored applying for a matching grant from the Mass Historical Commission, but the congregation vetoed Mass Historical's requirement for a preservation restriction on the building. In 2016, Friends of First Parish Meetinghouse was incorporated to raise funds and conduct the tours. The Restoration Committee continued to meet and work closely with Friends. With the assistance of Spencer & Vogt Architects, another application was submitted to the Community Preservation Committee, but it was tabled by them because there was a suit pending against the town of Acton, brought by some town residents and supported by Americans United for the Separation of Church and State regarding the use of CPC funds to restore churches. Also, during 2016, the illustrated guide to the Meeting House was published. In the spring of 2017, we were advised that the earliest our CPC application could be brought to town meeting would be in 2018. In late August of 2017, I was contacted by Lee Filson, then Governor General of the Society of Mayflower Descendants, who suggested that the Society would be interested in exploring the idea of taking over the meeting house and raising funds for its restoration. We would like to believe that our 9 long years of labor laid the groundwork for the GSMD to step up and continue what we worked so hard to accomplish. 9 years of weekly meetings, 9 years of highs and lows, times when we were energized and times when we talked about quitting. 9 years of writing grant proposals and mostly receiving rejection letters. 9 years of creating newsletters requesting donations with a mailing list of over 2,000. Happy times when the money flowed in and feelings of desperation when it did not. 9 years come to an end today. I especially want to recognize at this time the people who were the core of our committee and of the Friends. Rick McDonald, who unfortunately is not here today, was the heart of this group. He handled tours, created a database, and kept it up to date. His creative talents were utilized in the publishing of our brochures, making improvements to our website, layout and design of our newsletters, and the photography and layout of the illustrated guide. Donna Petrangelo, who was our history expert, kept the meeting minutes, wrote grants and letters, proofread everything we wrote, conducted tours, and was a driving force behind and writer of the illustrated guide. Bonnie Dyer, who started out on the desk at tours and grew into an expert and devoted tour guide and valuable and dedicated member of the committee. Joyce Stewart, who joined Friends at my request and became our treasurer. Joyce was the only person who wasn't a member of First Parish. And Joyce provided detailed financial reports for us and shared her vast experience working with nonprofits in Plymouth and her knowledge of how Plymouth government worked. Jack Barwis, who conducted tours, interfaced with the Partners for Sacred Places, and always kept us on our toes by asking hard questions. And last but not least, Julia Rose, who conducted tours and acted as secretary for a time, and performed a lot of jobs that brought her no glory, but deep appreciation for her hard work and time. We all spent every Wednesday morning together working on our common goal, which we reach today. I would like to conclude by reading the words of the Honorable Arthur Lord, President of the Pilgrim Society and Chairman of the Parish Committee of First Parish, at the laying of the cornerstone of the Meeting House on Monday, June 29th, 1896. On this hillside, rich in memories, associations, and history, we meet today to lay the cornerstone of the first church in Plymouth and the first church in America. Behind us rises the hill where rest in peace the dead of bygone generations. Before us stretches the first street of the Pilgrims, once bordered by their simple dwellings, once echoing to the tread of their weary feet. And beyond lies the sea, now sparkling in the sunlight of June, but whose dark waters in that stormy December reflects the white sail of the Mayflower. All around us is historic ground. It witnessed the humble beginnings of a great people. It was the cradle of a mighty nation, the rude yet tender home of civil and religious liberty, which elsewhere seemed but a scholar's idle dream. The inestimable privilege of such environments comes not alone. By its side, there ever stands the graver forms of duty and responsibility, and sometimes in their silent train, there comes in a lifetime of a generation the great opportunity, not bidden perchance, but ever welcomed. Another generation, 3/4 of a century ago, entered upon the work of commemorating the great events of Pilgrim history, of marking and adorning the localities peculiarly interesting to every American, of collecting and preserving each memento of the Pilgrims, which the hand of time has spared. Monument and statue, hall and rock attest to their labors. To this generation came the duty and the opportunity to erect upon the ruins of the old church a memorial, simple yet enduring, to the religious life of its founders, the last and best of the great memorials to the Pilgrims at Plymouth. Of such a memorial, more appropriate, interesting, and suggestive than any other, we lay the cornerstone. Long may it stand to impress upon the minds and hearts of the generations yet unborn the lessons of the lives and labors and faith of its Pilgrim founders, under whose benign influence the sea lost its terrors, the wilderness its fears, and sickness and death could not their souls dismay. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan, and thank you all the folks who have been so important. And I would like to invite, before I call on you, I would like to invite Woolard Lett, who is the acting regional lead for the New England region of the Unitarian Universalist Association, to bring greetings from our denomination.
Good morning. First, I'd like to say thank you for inviting me to join you at this very special occasion. I bring greetings from the National Office of the Association of Congregations, the Unitarian Universalist Association, and the New England region. Coming here today, after I received the invitation, I was thinking about, well, what words can I bring that would be both uplifting and edifying, and in light of like all of the complexity and the complicated nature that's life. One of the things that the Congregational Life staff for the Unitarian Universalist Association in New England has begun to share with congregational, both religious and lay leaders, is this idea that we call spiritual leadership. And it's an orientation that has several practices, and one of the practices I think is really appropriate to lift up on today's occasion, and that's called binding to tradition. You know, and when we talk about binding to tradition, and when we talk about tradition, we're really not talking about the past. We're talking about the present that brings the past and the future into the room. And as I think about today's event that we're commemorating, it really seems appropriate that we look at this idea, this practice of binding to tradition. The same sense of binding to tradition is reflected in a West African concept called Sankofa, where you look to your past to inform the future. And as I think about the accomplishments that you have made through just staying fast on the journey, despite the turns and the curves in the road, You know, in my earlier career, I worked as a college administrator and a faculty member in a graduate program called Community Economic Development. And in that program, I developed a course called Faith-Based Community Economic Development that talked about how congregations can become involved in their community in in their economic life, really. And just about, I guess about a week ago, I came across an article in the Atlantic magazine that asked the question, what will America do with its empty churches? And, you know, all of this is a reflection of the fact that we're living in a world, in a society that's changing and bringing new challenges. And this idea of binding to tradition says that in this present that we're living in, it's important for us to hold on to the hopes and the dreams, the principles that we started out, that we draw from our past, and use them to inform us as we enter into the future. So I want to congratulate this congregation on the work that it's done by binding to tradition, by reaching into the past and wrapping its arms around the Society of Mayflower Descendants and coming together here in the present for this event that we're commemorating today to ensure a better and a bright future for both the congregation and the community. And I look forward to, in my role as regional lead here in New England. This is my first time here in this particular church. I'm looking around and I'm just impressed with you could almost say the grandeur and the manifest history that's here. You walk into the room and you expect somebody to come out of the back with one of the hats on, breech pants. But again, thank you so much for inviting me to join you here. And I know that there's much for you to celebrate, but with all great things, you know, there's also some consolation because you're letting go. But know that, as we go forward, we'll go forward together. Thank you.
And then, many of us know the tireless work of Bill Copan, who did so much to help raise funds. And so, Bill, please come up and say a few words. Chair of the Community Preservation Committee for the town of Plymouth, Mr. Bill Copan.
Good morning. It's important to note when it comes to the Community Preservation Act that it's a great gift to the town of Plymouth. I always think of dates. I always think of May 11, 2002, when the town of Plymouth and its residents came together and passed the Community Preservation Act. And over the last 16 years, we've been able to preserve some of the most unique pieces of architecture of Plymouth, but also some of our natural heritage and habitat and wildlife and forests, and build much needed community housing. And that relies on the confidence of the residents of Plymouth. The Community Preservation Act finds its strength with the voters of Plymouth. The voters have to have confidence in the statute. When we make a recommendation at town meeting has to understand that this is in the best interest of the town. And this story of this building and of the commitment of the Unitarian parish congregation here on this site and the Mayflower Society is a historic moment. I think as we were moving this article through town meeting, many of the residents of Plymouth and town meeting members noted the importance of what was happening here. And we wanted to come today and congratulate both parties coming together, preserving this location. We think it's fitting that town meeting played a role in that by voting to support the restoration of the building. So it was a town meeting vote that saved the town to the meeting house in this congregation and its future with the Mayflower Society. So again, I thank you for the support the community has for the Community Preservation Act, so we can do good things in this community. And this is one great example of that effort. Congratulations.
I'd like to invite George Carmody, who is the Governor General. That's right.
I can deal without the microphone. Bill, we are so appreciative of your help, assistance, and guidance through this process. I want to give you two things. I know, having talked with Bill, that he is a history buff. Believe me, he is a history buff. The Cry of a Stone was originally written in about 1618 by Robert Cushman, and is the best explanation for why the separatists needed to separate from the Church of England and what their theological ideas were. You will get a good sense of that, why they chose to do what they did. There is, by the way, a copy of that in your library that we gave us some time ago. And also, another token of our appreciation for your desk as well. You can open it hour another time, but in any case, we really appreciate that.
I like to open it.
Absolutely.
Oh, very nice.
Well, it's crystal with our emblem, and it's a token of our appreciation. Thank you so much, Bill. Couldn't have done it without you.
I learned not too long ago that the black hymnals, which preceded the gray ones, in the back of the black hymnal there is a supplement devoted to this congregation that has a number of things. And one of the things that I found there was the hymn. The words are in your order of service. It was written for the dedication of this building in 1899. I've written a fourth verse to the hymn to kind of bring us to today. In that fourth verse, the third line, giving has 3 notes, so it's given. So please rise. It's the tune of Battle Hymn of the Republic. Please rise and join in singing the hymn.
Whose power
Thank you.
We will now gratefully receive your offering for the mission and ongoing ministry of this congregation as our choir rises to sing. I am so thrilled that my colleague, the Reverend Judy Campbell, is here with us this morning. She helped lead this congregation through transition time in the last year before my arrival. And I know that your work with them is so greatly loved and appreciated. And look forward to what you have to share with folks this morning.
I didn't even think about not tearing up today. I am so honored to join you in singing out blessings for the journey. And thank you all for inviting me here today. You know I love you. And I'm so glad we are all together. Seems like deja vu all over again, doesn't it? Because I am a piece of your journey as you are of mine. When I first came to you a little over a year ago, I sat down with the parish committee and asked them to do a little writing before we did any talking. I asked that we think about and share in writing their personal joys and concerns for the congregation at that time, a year ago. And then I asked that we write a prayer for the next steps on the journey. We shared these with one another, and I still have them. Now, today you are taking those next steps. So I would ask us once again to take a few minutes in prayerful or contemplative silence and write down your joys and concerns for the here and now, and or your own prayer or wish for the next chapter in your congregational journey. You aren't just any congregation, you know. And your story, yours right here, right now, is part of the fabric of American social and religious history. There are not too many churches that can say that. So, if you dig around in your order of service and find the piece of light gray paper that's there, I would ask you, and you all have pencils, I believe, would ask that you write down some of your joys and concerns and your gratitudes about the now of this next step. You can write down joys and concerns and thoughts for the future of this, your own, and America's first UU congregation. We will have some contemplative time and music for you to do this. And then when we walk out of this building and into our next chapter up to the Brewster Chapel, you can place these in a basket inside the door as you enter the chapel. If you need more time, you'll note that the church email is at the bottom of the paper, and you can email your words sometime this week. It is Reverend Art's intention to collect them and publish them in a document that will become part of your ongoing historic record. So while it is not required, we encourage you to sign your name to your words. With that said, I won't say, let us pray. What I will say is let us all write out what is in our hearts today. Blessed be. Amen.
Does anybody need anything to write on or with?
And now may we join in singing Spirit of Life. Would you remain seated and let us sing this as a prayer.
The Lord hath more truth and light yet to break forth out of his holy word. Perhaps you've seen those words before. They're emblazoned on the wall to my right. We're told that they were spoken by the man in the center window on my left, the Reverend John Robinson. He was the minister of the fledgling band of separatists who formed a congregation in Scrooby, England, then fled to Leiden and Holland. The scene here, as you know, depicts some of them leaving Holland on the journey that would bring them here to Plymouth. The majority of the congregation were not able to make that voyage, and Reverend Robinson stayed with them. He never saw these shores, but as we can see, those of his flock who settled here never forgot him. As you know, I'm relatively new to these shores myself, having moved here just 6 months ago. It's been a busy fall, and I haven't yet learned as much of your history as I would have liked. So last Sunday, when Bonnie approached me and said, "We're moving out of the building soon, and I want to give you a tour of the meeting house before we go," I readily agreed. I've been wandering around this building for nearly 6 months, and I never associated the words on the wall with the man in the window. It just didn't occur to me, but when Bonnie pointed that out, my head began to spin. You see, Christian theology at that time taught that the Bible is the revealed Word of God, and that every truth that God had to convey to humanity had already been said. It was all done. And it was assumed and taught that the church and its leaders had the keys to interpreting the Bible and sharing whatever truth and light God had revealed there. This is still the understanding that some Christian churches have today. Our Unitarian faith and our Unitarian Universalist faith, but this congregation came out of the Unitarian tradition, our faith tells us differently. We believe that there is always new truth to be discerned, that God or the universe or the sacred source of life and love, whatever you choose to call, is always opening us to new ideas, new truth, new insight, if we but take the time to pay attention. It wasn't until earlier this week when I was here in the sanctuary with Bonnie that I came to realize that our separatist and Pilgrim forebearers may have originated or did originate at least part of this new and radical theology. And believe me, it was radical for that time and continues to be so today. This radical theology, this radical change in how they and how we today envision our lives, our beliefs, and our community was not something that came out of the blue. The changes and transformation that they went through came after much prayer, thoughtfulness, and discernment, much listening to each other's lives. Over the last 400 and some years, when they and their descendants down the line to you sitting here today, when they and you have thrived, it has been through transformative change that came through discernment, thoughtfulness, prayer, and much conversation about the lived experience of this community. This has led to more truth and light that has been breaking forth for over 4 centuries. After all, it was 398 years ago this month that the Pilgrims chose this land that they would call Plymouth to be their home on this new continent. For over 4 centuries, there has been new insight, new truth, new understanding that has been revealed to you, to your forebearers. For over 4 centuries, you have evolved and grown and thrived. Yes, there have been mistakes, grave errors of judgment and behavior. But I believe that thoughtful discernment, continued thoughtful listening to the call of the holy can always bring us back to the right path. Now a new chapter of truth and light has been revealed, has been discerned, has broken forth among two groups of people who claim heritage with the Pilgrim forebears. First Parish is the spiritual offspring, and the General Society of Mayflower Descendants is the biological offspring. Both have a claim to this heritage and to this building. Both, after some anguish and tears, some relief and joy, much discernment and deep conversation and prayer, now realize that this National Pilgrim Memorial Meetinghouse should belong to the General Society of Mayflower Descendants, an organization that is better able to care for it, open it to the public, and dedicate it to the Pilgrim legacy on which it stands. First Parish Plymouth will continue the unbroken legacy of nearly 400 years of regular worship in this space, in this neighborhood, here and in Brewster Chapel up the hill. Without the enormous burden of caring for this building, First Parish, I believe, will be able to more fully realize your mission, and you will grow and thrive in ways that are unimaginable to us today. Just as our Pilgrim forebears could never have imagined where their journey would take their descendants and all of us. This is a significant and meaningful time, and future generations will honor and celebrate this moment as we do other important times in history. This is a happy time. This is a sad time. This is a painful time. This is an anxious time as we all wonder how everything will be accomplished. And this is a momentous occasion, all rolled into one. As some celebrate what has been achieved here, some are deeply conflicted and angry about this process. And it is all of our job to hold each other lovingly, gently, to rebuild whatever fabric of the community has been torn, and to acknowledge that everything that we feel today is good and holy. For we know deep in our hearts that on this journey, the sacred, the holy God will always have more truth and light to break forth into our lives. Amen. And blessed be. Let us pray together. God of our ancestors, Holy One of many names, we gather this morning after much discernment and prayer, joy and sorrow and pain, to invite First Parish in Plymouth to hand over the deed to this historic meeting house to the General Society of Mayflower Descendants. There are many feelings that we all have, and everything that we have sought to attain in our lives always has joy and sadness and pain mixed in together. May this meeting house and both of our organizations grow and thrive in ways that we cannot imagine. May we continue to always listen deeply to each other and to the call of the holy, which will always lead us forth as it has for many generations. And now comes the time. Amen, and blessed be, to do what needs to be done here. And I invite do I invite the trustees up? Okay, so Deborah Rudolph, one of the longtime member of this congregation and one of our trustees of the Meeting House Charitable Trust, will give us some history of what has happened over these last several years. Last 2 years, I guess. Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Deb Rudolph, and I have served in a variety of capacities here in this congregation. I started in the choir and sang with the choir under our able leadership of Lynn Wilkinson, who is now our music director emeritus and is here with us today. Thank you for coming today, Lynn. And continuing on, I've served on the board of directors and as a director and as I've held every office there. I've been the clerk and the treasurer and the president of that board. And I was serving on the board when we began this process. But I have to start with thanking particularly Jan Palmer Tarbox. Oh, Jan Blanchard now. When you go back a long way, you remember the old names first. Because it really was Jan who really spearheaded the efforts on restoration for this building and who really gathered around her a most able group of people who could take that forward. But it was Jan who really got that started. And they really and truly met every single week and worked really hard to raise money, and they worked really hard to get professional advice and to really help us be able to restore this building. And all the time that she worked, our membership was shrinking and becoming less able to really support that effort. And they reached out way beyond our walls. They sought grants and they reached out to a huge mailing list. And I think one of their biggest accomplishments are these beautiful windows. I mean, they raised the money so that we really could start restoring the windows. The windows were literally melting, right? It's glass, and so it was literally shifting down. So, you know, we have been aware, this congregation has been aware of how much critical need we are in to restore this building, and that we have a responsibility both to our forebears and to the generations to come to preserve this building for all that it stands for, both for the civil body politic and for religious freedom. So it was the summer of 2016, actually, when we first started our conversations with the General Society of Mayflower Descendants, and we began meeting to discuss the future of our historic meeting house. This site has been our home of worship dating back to the arrival of the Pilgrims in 1620. We have come up through the ages, and our hearts have often rejoiced here, and we have celebrated weddings, and we have mourned deaths, and we have watched our children grow up. This place is a sacred place. The parish committee gathered together in the summer and took on this initial task of exploring these possibilities. And at that time, they appointed a team to do the negotiating. That team has been Anne-Marie Harnett. You can stand up, we know you. Ron Clark, where are you, Ron? You're here. And Anne-Marie Schultz, please stand up, and myself. And the four of us have done our best to represent this congregation, to bring back to you all of the ideas and concerns and work through them and to represent you to the best of our ability in this process. And we hope that our congregation finds that we have done so. This same group of people then was appointed by the governing board, by the parish committee, to serve as the trustee representatives for the First Parish in Plymouth trustee of the charitable trust that was formed, and I'll get to that later. Thank you. The congregation participated in conversations. We created opportunities to have dialogue, to ask questions, to raise your concerns, so that we would have as full an impact and input as we could manage to gather. We made ourselves available at coffee hours. We held services. We have worked hard, probably not as hard as meeting weekly, but we've worked hard. On December 11th in 2016, there was a special meeting of the congregation to consider a proposal that First Parish Church enter into a joint venture agreement with the Mayflower Society in order to transfer the meeting house to them and to assure its restoration and preservation. By unanimous vote, the parish committee was empowered to develop and implement and plan to develop a memorandum of understanding. When that memorandum of understanding was prepared, we called a special meeting of the congregation to review it. The congregation reviewed it on April 9th, 2017, and it was unanimously approved to enter into the memorandum of understanding. At the same time, the congregation approved the expenditure of up to $14,000 for an appraisal of the meeting house, and that also passed unanimously.
That meeting was not, that vote was not unanimous.
The records show that vote was. And that's in our record, and I'll note your objection to the record.
Thank you.
Then on September 10th in 2017, there was another special meeting of the congregation to vote on the proposal for a joint venture agreement between the congregation and the Mayflower Society. At that time, the Mayflower Society, the conversation had been that they would raise an endowment of between $3 and $6 million for the preservation and for the ongoing support of this congregation. On December 17th, a congregational meeting was held in order to review the trust, the National Pilgrim Memorial Meetinghouse Charitable Trust. That article was approved by the congregation, and the trust was signed on that same day, on December 17th. It was then re-signed on January 10th. With the creation of the trust, so we created this trust, the separate 501c3 trust. Our application has been submitted to the IRS, and it is still pending. We haven't received their final approval, but we have their letters with their dates saying that they received it. We then moved on to the next step, which was to deed the meeting house into the trust. So the trust was then 50% of the trustee was the congregation, and 50% of the trustee was the Mayflower Descendants. Each trustee appointed 4 representatives to continue to meet and work through the details of going through with this transaction. And those, we continued with the same 4 representatives as the trustee, which Anne Marie Harnett, Anne Marie Schultz, Ron Clark, and myself. And the Mayflower Descendants trustees, Lee Filson, who's here, and George Garmany, is Don Studley, and we don't have our 4th one, Richard Clifford. Gilmore. Richard Gilmore. So the 8 of us have met throughout these last 2 years, trying to work really hard to come to the conclusion of this. Throughout all this time, the Mayflower Society set out to raise the money as provided in the agreement, and they have at this time certified to us that they have raised $3.1 million for the restoration, and they have also started the endowment with bequests that they are receiving, and they already have bequests in excess of $1 million. So if I could please have Anne Marie come up, and Lee come up, and George. I'm a little nervous.
We all are.
So if you would just stand in front of the table there, that would be fine. Oh, yeah, sure, come around here. So I'm going to ask each of you to please confirm your efforts. So Anne Marie, as president of the parish committee, do you believe that the parish committee has done its best to fulfill its obligation to the congregation and to act according to the direction of the congregation in developing the plan to transfer ownership of the National Pilgrim Memorial Meetinghouse to the General Society of Mayflower Descendants? George, as current Governor General of the Society, do you certify to this congregation that the Society has worked diligently to raise the funds and to meet the requirements under the trust?
I do.
And do you certify that going forward, Mayflower Society will do its utmost to preserve this meeting house for posterity and to keep it according to its historic legacy?
With the grace of God, we shall.
And the final piece is to honor all agreements that have been made between the General Society and the congregation, that this will continue to be a place where the congregation known as First Parish in Plymouth will conduct its worship services.
I do.
And Anne Marie, on behalf of the congregation, does the congregation pledge to maintain services here to continue the legacy of the ongoing legacy that was bestowed on us from our Pilgrim forebears to worship here? Thank you. George, you're all set. I'm actually going to ask Anne Marie and Lee to stay up here. We have a little bit change in order. The actual thing that we're going to do next is to transfer the deed. Shelley Jo Talvakia. Shelley Jo, do you represent that you are the treasurer of First Parish in Plymouth?
I am.
And you are the person who is responsible for managing the assets of our congregation?
I am.
And do you certify that you have in your hands the original deed that was drafted and signed by you and Anne Marie Harnett to place this meeting house into the National Pilgrim Memorial Meetinghouse Charitable Trust? Okay. And it has been recorded. It was, let me see, I have my notes here. The deed was signed on August 20, 2018, and it was recorded in the Plymouth County Registry of Deeds on August 21st, 2018. And Shelley Jo, would you kindly hand the deed over to Lee Sinclair Filson, who is president of the trust. Good idea, Lee. At the same time that the deed was recorded, we also recorded the trust document itself and a certificate of trustee, and Shelley Jo also has those original documents. Would you also provide those to Lee? Okay, both of them, Shelley Jo. The trustee certificate. Thank you. So the trust is now the owner of this building. First Parish in Plymouth has worked diligently to abide by all the terms and conditions associated with that. The next thing that we're going to do is to sign the resignation of trustee. We have been provided with statements, financial statements from the Mayflower Descendants, and Anne Marie, will you say, is that at the last meeting of the parish committee governing board, the board voted that the Mayflower Society, having raised $3 million plus, that under the terms of our agreement, it now comes to us to resign as trustee of the trust, which in effect will leave the Mayflower Society as the sole trustee of the trust holding this meeting house. Yes, so that was done. So we're going to actually sign the resignation of trustee here, and I'll actually read it to you. Resignation of First Parish in Plymouth Unitarian Universalist as trustee of the National Pilgrim Memorial Meetinghouse Charitable Trust. We, First Parish in Plymouth Unitarian Universalist of 12 Church Street, formerly 19 Town Square, Plymouth, Plymouth County, Massachusetts, the church, as a trustee of the National Pilgrim Memorial Meetinghouse Charitable Trust, created by an agreement of trust originally dated December 4th, 2017, the trust. By power reserved to us in Article 6.1 of said trust, and pursuant to the direction of the governing board of the church, do hereby resign as trustee of said trust. Upon acceptance of this resignation, the General Society of Mayflower Descendants of 4 Winslow Street, Plymouth, Massachusetts, is the sole remaining trustee. This amendment shall take effect when recorded with the Plymouth County Registry of Deeds in Plymouth, Massachusetts. This amendment to the trust is executed under seal this 9th day of December, 2018. Thank you, Anne Marie. You can give me the pen. Waiver of notice and acceptance of trustee resignation of the National Pilgrim Memorial Meetinghouse Charitable Trust. We, the General Society of Mayflower Descendants of 4 Winslow Street, Plymouth, Plymouth County, Massachusetts, as trustee of the National Pilgrim Memorial Meetinghouse Charitable Trust, created by an agreement of trust originally dated December 4, 2017, the trust, as provided in Article 6.3a of said trust, do hereby waive notice required in Article 6.2, and do hereby accept the resignation of First Parish in Plymouth Unitarian Universalist of 12 Church Street, formerly 19 Town Square, Plymouth, Plymouth County, Massachusetts, as trustee of the trust. The resignation shall take effect when it is recorded with the Plymouth County Registry of Deeds in Plymouth, Massachusetts. This waiver and acceptance is executed under seal this 9th day of December, 2018. sign this document of your own free will as the true and lawful representative of First Parish in Plymouth?
I have.
I, Sinclair Wilson, have you signed this document of your free will and as the lawful representative of the General Society of Mayflower Descendants?
Yes, I did.
Everybody will note that there's a line in there that says this resignation takes effect upon recording with the Registry of Deeds. That will happen hopefully sometime within the next 30 days. We still have to satisfy any requirements that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts may have in terms of the Attorney General providing a review of the transfer, and they will determine whether or not we have to submit it to the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court for their approval. So these documents will be held until such time as we have the appropriate approvals in place. But this is now, this meeting house, this wonderful place that holds so many memories for all of us and so many hopes for all of us, is now placed with with mixed feelings in the hands of the General Society of Mayflower Descendants. Thank you.
And Lee, I would love for you to come up and say a few words, and George as well.
Today is a big day for both First Parish Church and the General Society of Mayflower Descendants. In 2014, after I was elected Governor General, I walked down Water Street to reflect on my new responsibilities. Next to me were two young men staring down at historic Plymouth Rock. One said to the other, "You mean this is where the Pina and Santa Maria landed?" I knew then that we needed to focus on our education mission. Fast forward to an early breakfast I had with Chairman of the Plymouth Board of Selectmen, Ken Tavares, who had called to get together after my election. I should have known he had a hidden agenda. Halfway through coffee, in his quiet manner, he asked if there was anything that GSMD could do to help with the meeting house, which was in urgent need of repair. His biggest fear, he said, was that your congregation would have to sell the church and a Starbucks could end up at the top of town square. I politely declined, telling him we were planning to expand our property on North Street. I left. 3 days later, I was still consumed with his query. It was on my mind when I went to bed, when I got up, and all day in between. If GSMD didn't save the meeting house, who would? I knew the only way we could save the building was through an endowment and through turning it into a revenue-producing project. Then I thought about the Pina and the Santa Maria. The rest is history. I talked with your congregation leaders after meeting with Jan, and I needed to gauge interest before I took it any further. Let's pursue the possibility, they told me. I took it to our executive committee, who agreed we should see if there was an interest at our General Board of Assistance meeting upcoming in Indiana. At that meeting, I could barely get the idea out before members spoke one by one about how this was our responsibility and that we owe this to our ancestors. We instantly knew this was the right thing to do and that it was the perfect place for our education center. As we reflect on this historic moment today, we should understand that even though this is a sad and happy occasion, it is the best option for the building. While it is true that a building is not a church, the people are the church. In this case, this building is known as the oldest continuous spiritual institution in America. That is why it is so important to us that First Parish Church still holds services here, even though we will schedule them in a different way going forward. But it is also a building that was designed to memorialize the Mayflower Pilgrims. And as the descendants of the separatists, GSMD can take on the responsibility, like no one else, of saving this beautiful historic structure in perpetuity. It is a win-win situation. All because Ken Tavares cared enough about the history of Plymouth to throw out an idea. A special thank you also this morning to the members of First Parish that are representatives to the Trust, and to Bill Cohan, who single-handedly made it possible for GSMD to take on this project. Also to Art Lavoie for his counsel and wisdom, and to the Mayflower Pilgrim ancestors who are pushing us all to do this. We are all just an eye blink in eternity, but together, all of us in this room are building a bridge between the past and future generations. Please welcome next Governor General of the Mayflower Society, George Garmany, Jr.
What a day. Good morning, friends. Good morning, cousins. I bring you the good wishes from the good wishes to the congregation from the GSMD, which we all call the Mayflower Society. Most of you don't know this, but I actually grew up in a UU household in Florida. I can still remember the mornings many years ago in church school when we learned that the Universalists were going to merge with our denomination, our Unitarian denomination. That was a momentous occasion. I also remember coming, the first time I came to worship in this church, Jack Barbas took me under his arm and introduced me around and so forth. It felt like a return to the faith. Thanks to my background, I know that the chalice and the flame have been the symbol of Unitarianism, and Unitarian Universalism, since the 1940s, for about 80 years. It may seem to you that the chalice will go out in this building today, but in fact, the chalice will be replaced. It will be replaced by a candle. The candle was described by William Bradford so many years ago, observing that one small candle may light 1,000. We can all learn a lesson from our Jewish friends this last day of Hanukkah when all the lights will be lit. You know that a menorah doesn't have to be candles. It can be oil lamps, it can be electric lights, it can be little LEDs powered by batteries and they flash and blink around and so forth. Because from the Jewish point of view, it's not the vessel or the energy source that matters, it's the light. It's the light or the spirit that really counts. And you may be confident that the Mayflower Society will keep the light alive in this building. We too conduct a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, just as the Unitarian Universalist denomination does. And the quote to my right, which was so faithfully reported and discussed by Art, is every bit as vital to us as it is to you. Our people were there when it was originally said. Please know that we accept this building with a cheerful spirit. We are well aware of the awesome responsibility that goes with it. And your congregation has borne that responsibility for so many years. Thank you, thank you. We hope that you'll continue to come here for worship as community members, because it'll be a community center too. And some of you may be members of our own organization. That'd be great. In any of these roles, you will always be welcome here. And I said that officially for Deb a few minutes ago. I'm telling you from the heart now. You're welcome here. There are not enough words in the English language to express my gratitude for this gift. On behalf of our 30,000 members around the world, I return our thanks to you. And assuming the attitude of prayerfulness, which John Robinson shows over there, we will do our very best to make you proud of what we have done today. Thank you.
Now, in an act to symbolize what we have done today, we will be leaving the meeting house, singing Forward Through the Ages, and reconvening in Brewster Chapel. So I invite Anne Marie, as president of the congregation, to take the chalice and to lead us. Anne Marie and I can lead us. Forward Through the Ages is in your order of service, and we will, Sandy, if you could start playing up there, and we will have our benediction and first a brand new hymn for this congregation that will mark this new occasion up in Brewster Chapel. For those who, for any mobility issues, or who would rather not walk out the front door and around the building, you can go out the back door here and meet us as we walk up the hill. Thank you so much, John, for being here and for playing for us today. Thank you, everyone, for being involved. May we sing out with Forward Through the Ages and reconvene in Brewster Chapel. And talking to many of you, there's been another song ringing in my head. It is a reminder from my Catholic upbringing, and it is a song by the monks of Weston Priory in Weston, Vermont, and begins like this. Journeys ended, journeys begun, to go where we have never been, to be beyond our past. We begin a journey today and we end a journey. We go to a place that we have never been, both GSMD and First Parish. May this journey be fruitful for all of us. May we listen deeply to the call of the Spirit as we go forward. May we move in a way that the Spirit calls us so that we may all bring more truth and light to the world around us. And may the people say amen. Amen. Thank you all very much for participating in this momentous occasion. Now I'm going to invite you to go back to Kendall Hall for coffee hour, but we wanted to end the service here. And for those of us from the congregation, the chalice is actually going to stay here. We've got a couple more services and Christmas Eve service in the meeting house. But the chalice will hold the place for our return here after Christmas. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.